Okay, ladies and gentlemen, to deliver the first of our policies, please welcome Party Leader Ben Habib.
Thank you very much, folks. Now, normally, if you've heard me speak, I do it without notes. I thought since I was going to give you our first couple of policies, I might note some of them down, and I've noted them down for you. So this is going to be a relatively easy speech, I hope, for me to make, not completely coming out of my mind. But before I start, can I just say, isn't it peculiar that a so-called racist party has a multi-ethnic leader? You lot clearly don't know what you signed up for. But on a more serious note, there are some anti-racist people outside, and the reason we were slightly delayed starting this conference was because they're blocking our live stream signal, and we were trying to get that fixed. So for all their moral correctitude, actually they would wish to silence us. They wish to silence what we have to say. We will not let them silence us. Now, when I first indicated on the 30th of June 2025 that I was considering launching a political party, I set two hurdles for the party. The first was that we would have to hit 30,000 members. And I thought that might be a get-out-of-jail-free card, that I wouldn't hit it and that I could retire back to my normal life and say, well, I gave it a shot, it didn't work. Within a couple of months, we hit our target. And if you had said to me then that in 6 months, Ben, you will have nearly 40,000 members, you would have fought your first council by-election and got 12.3% in it. Where's the wonderful Alex Stevenson? And that you, at the time of speaking on your first policy, you would have a candidate standing in a by-election that has got so riled up my erstwhile party that they've been denouncing him non-stop on X. I won't name the party, I think you can guess. But for all the banging of drums that party does about freedom of speech, actually, it stands against it. It wishes to silence Nick Buckley. How astonishing it must have been for them that a political party wished to stand a candidate in an election. How bizarre a concept is that? But as Nick said, whatever happens in that by-election actually won't make a jot of a difference on the national stage, but in one respect. If we do well in that by-election, it will send a seismic shock through Westminster. So it was absolutely vital we stand, absolutely vital, and that's why they didn't want us to do it. So to the extent that any of you have got free time coming up over the next couple of weeks, I plead to you, please go up to Gorton and Denton, support Nick Buckley, and let's win this by-election. Now, before I start on the first policy, I do just want to thank a few people. I want to thank the Emmanuel Centre particularly, because the location of this venue was given away earlier this week, and following the disclosure of the location, they were inundated with the so-called anti-hate people trying to shut us down, the anti-racists trying to shut us down, and they held their ground. And I'm very grateful to them. The only way we're going to prevail, ladies and gentlemen, is if we all hold our ground. We must not bend. We must keep standing up, whatever they do and whatever they say. I would also like to thank, you've heard her name a few times, some of you know who she is. Luckily for those of you who don't, she's here, Floss. Floss, stand up, be counted. This venue, this event wouldn't have taken place without Floss. I also want to thank she can be a bit of a pain sometimes, but she got this together. I want to thank Françoise as well, who's head of events. Françoise is here somewhere, who's been instrumental in doing this. And then I want to thank David Rhodes, who habitually tells me, repeatedly tells me he wants to take a back seat. Well, for someone who wants to take a back seat, he's heading up the policy development of Advance UK. He's a phenomenal member of our college, and without him, we wouldn't have what I'm about to disclose to you. And I'd like, last of all, if I may, to thank the college for the hard work that they do behind the scenes. What I'm going to show you now is just a synopsis of our draft policies. This is not comprehensive. It took me ages poring through the document they produced to actually pick out the key bits that I thought I could get through in now 18 minutes that I've got left to speak to you. They are in draft because as we move forward between now and the next general election, we are going to continue to refine our policies. We're going to continue to make the public aware of what those policies are, so that by the time we get to 2028, 2029, we have a perfect, or as close as perfect, set of policies that have been thought through in great detail, and we're going to back it up with draft legislation. That draft legislation will be appended to our manifesto, and for those of the public who wish to read it, the exact direction of travel that we will set for this country will be known. There will be no ambiguity in our policies. It won't be a manifesto put together within 3 weeks. Isn't it peculiar, ladies and gentlemen, that political parties stand for government and they produce a manifesto 2 or 3 weeks before the election, full of nonsense, none of which ever gets delivered. That has to change. And so we will have draft legislation. And the benefit of having draft legislation, there's multiple benefits. The first of which is that the British people know precisely what it is we're going to do, so we can't let them down. We've made it crystal clear. The next benefit, and this is really important, is that the Lords can't interfere with it. The civil service can't interfere with it. When I walk into the Commons in May 2029 for the first time as Prime Minister of this country, that is the risk of being a leader of a political party. You may end up as Prime Minister, but when I walk into the Commons, I'm going to thump this document down, this draft legislation, and I'm going to look across to the opposite benches, and I'm going to address the Lords, the civil service and the British people, and I'm going to thump this document down and say, I have the democratic backing of the British people to deliver this agenda. We have one last chance to save this country. I think I can't remember who said it earlier, but it took 1,000 years to build this great country. It's taken 30 years to trash it. And we have to save it, and save it we will. Now, the first policy that we were going to draft was on immigration, because that is the thing that really exercises the people's minds. 80% of people in this country put immigration at the top of their concern list. But as we were drafting it, a couple of things happened. The first thing was that we realized, the group of people that were drafting it and myself, that actually there's something more fundamental that has to underpin not just our immigration policy, but all our policies. It is who we are. What are we as a country? Who are we? What do we wish to be? How do we wish to move forward? Unless you've established that principle, those sets of principles, you're at sea making other policies. You won't know how to make the other policies you need to make to save the United Kingdom if you can't first establish who we are. And I'm afraid, as much as Keir Starmer and the liberal globalist lunatics would like to categorize British culture as something of an inferior debate. They call it the culture wars. We're not going to entertain the culture wars. As much as they might wish to categorize it as that, actually British culture is what we're fighting for. When we went to war against Hitler, we didn't go to war for economic advancement. We went to war to save our way of life, to save our constitution, our culture, our people. And we are at that point again. There aren't guns being fired, but we're at a point where we have to fight that same battle for our way of life. So, the government, in its desire to set aside this nation, has defined cultural nationalism as far right. How many of you in this room were aware of that before I just told it to you? A few. The government of the United Kingdom has denounced British culture. If you look up far-right terrorism, you will find that it defines it as violence perpetrated in the pursuit of far-right ideologies, and one far-right ideology that it cites is cultural nationalism. Without a culture, we have no nation state. And they would like to diminish our culture, tell us that those of us who believe in it are far right, and at the same time, tell us that cultures coming from abroad should be celebrated, championed, have a protective cloak put around them, and we should take the knee to their cultures. Enough of that. They have traduced our culture to such an extent that actually when people are asked, well, what does it mean to be British? We're reduced to ridiculous platitudes such as, well, being nice, being tolerant. Well, it's a hell of a lot more muscular than that, I have to remind people. British culture is a rich, woven web of brilliance. And I've highlighted a few points on the screen, as you can see. Morality, customs, behaviors, laws, art, music, architecture, a shared history, shared values, language. Why do they wish to denounce our national heroes? Because they want to cut our connection with our history, our common history. Why do they wish to decolonize the English language? Because if they can control language, they can denounce our culture. Why do they make laws like bringing into the body of British law the European Convention of Human Rights, the Human Rights Act? Because they want to set aside what it means to be a British citizen. This is the effect of 30 years of government policy. Well, it has to stop now. We know what British culture is. Sorry, I'm pointing at a screen down there because I can see what you can see up there, down there. And all of you will recognize what those words mean, and they play into each other. Morality manifests itself in our art. Our history manifests itself in art, in music, our architecture, our great forefathers who built wonderful buildings and statues, who now we're told are racist and they need to come down. That is just a lie. It is an attack on our culture. Culture is the foundational building block. It is the glue that allows us to identify who we are. Someone asked me before I came in to speak to you, are you a bit nervous addressing 1,000 people in the Emmanuel Center? And I thought about it for a second, and actually I wasn't nervous at all. And why wasn't I nervous? Because I knew I was coming to address a body of people who share my life vision. We are of the same culture. You are our family and I am your family. And that's how it has to be. There's something that I do want to just focus on a little bit. We tend to think of culture separately from law. And law has been used to defeat British culture. I touched on the Human Rights Act. But there's been a whole body of law that's been put into place, including, for example, defining far right as believing in this country's culture. There's been a whole body of law that has been attacking our culture. And if you have a body of law that informs you that you need to behave in a particular way, then you start behaving in that way because you don't want to break the law. And when you start behaving in that way, you adopt this new culture that the government is forcing down our throats, this multiculturalism, the ending of what you and I might identify as British culture. Law is upstream of culture, which is upstream of experience, which reinforces culture, which then informs parliamentarians on how to make law. There is a circle, and we have to reverse the circle they've been pushing down our throats for the last 30 years. So just to sum up, our culture is freedom, nation state, duty and patriotism. Being a British citizen is a huge privilege, but it comes with duty. You owe this country something for being a citizen. As Andy died, I think he said he's served 10 years in the Paras. That is fulfilling your duty. I've had a great life. I'm trying to fulfill my duty now by giving back to the British people. And you're all here because you're fulfilling your duty, because you see we're imperiled. That sense of, that contract between the state, between the people, it's not just about the state giving. We have to give back. And I'm so pleased to see so many people re-engaged, because you are all giving back to this country. You are going to save this country through that cultural commitment. I want to talk about aspiration and merit as well. We've forgotten what aspiration is. Every time something goes wrong, we look at the state and say, well, can you please save us? Can you do something? Can you spend more money? We've got 8 million people out of a workforce of 35 million who are surviving on universal credit. And yet we keep saying we haven't got enough people in the economy, we've got to take in more migrants. It is ridiculous. We need aspiration reinstalled in the United Kingdom so people wish to come off dependency, wish to go into work, and we're going to reveal a couple of those policies in a second that's going to help do that. But as I said, law comes upstream of culture, and there are some fundamental legal changes that we would do on the first day in government. The first thing we would do, and it's kind of ironic, really, that we would be doing this, because it was us that set up the European Convention of Human Rights. I can't remember, again, which brilliant speaker earlier said that some European countries are grateful for us having saved them from the grip of Nazi tyranny. But we set up the ECHR not because the United Kingdom needed to be policed, its human rights needed to be policed. Our human rights have existed for over 1,000 years. It was the Europeans who needed the European Convention of Human Rights because they just can't help tearing themselves apart. But that European Convention of Human Rights has now been put into such, it's turned into a mill round our necks. In the pursuit of human rights, we are forgetting what it means to be us. And we're not being allowed to put British national interest first. We're not allowed to put British people's interests first. And in fact, we get the bizarre result that often we will protect criminals and denounce victims, as we've seen with the rape gangs. All of that comes from the European Convention of Human Rights as put into the body of British law through the Human Rights Act. That was one of Blair's initial gifts to the British people, and we are going to repeal it on the first day in government. We are going to abolish the Equality Act. There's nothing about equality in the Equality Act. The Equality Act produces inequality. It informs us that you will be judged by the color of your skin, your ethnicity, your religious beliefs, not by the content of your character. Quite the opposite of what Martin Luther King had in mind. The Equalities Act has to go, and that will go on the first day of an advanced government. All hate speech laws will be abolished. And now the last one, and you might think, why the hell is Ben going back to the withdrawal agreement that got us out of the European Union? Well, the withdrawal agreement is a bastardization of the United Kingdom. It did not give effect to our leaving the EU. What it did was rearrange the United Kingdom's relationship with the EU. In many ways, it made it worse. And I think all of you know that if we are still infected with the global order, we will never be able to put this country first. And there's something particularly bad about the withdrawal agreement, and many of you, all of you perhaps, have heard me speak about it before, which is the Northern Ireland Protocol. We have become... A lot of people think Northern Irish politics is a minority sport. It isn't. When a country puts a flipping border down the middle of itself and heaves off over 1 million citizens to a foreign power, subject to foreign laws adjudicated by a foreign court, you know that country has lost its way. Northern Ireland... The Northern Ireland Protocol is not just about Northern Ireland. It is about us rediscovering who the hell we are. Are we going to stand by our British brethren, or are we going to throw them under a bus? I know what I'm going to do. And we are going to get rid of the withdrawal agreement. And there'll be a whole policy on how we're going to deal with the EU, none of which von der Leyen is going to much enjoy reading. Now, there's been a lot of talk of Christianity, and of course we are a tolerant country, but we must never forget that we're not just culturally a Christian country, we are constitutionally a Christian country. We must not forget that. How is it that it has come to be that people talk about the United Kingdom as if it's a multi-faith country? Sure, you can have different faiths. You can be an atheist. You don't have to believe in Christianity. But if you live in this country, you must recognize that this is a Christian country. Starmer wants to remove the bishopric from the House of Lords. Why does he want to do that? I mean, the bishopric are a pretty useless bunch of people now because the Church of England itself has lost its way. But the reason he wants to remove the bishopric from the House of Lords is because he wants to remove the last constitutional vestige of Christianity manifesting itself in our constitution. He wants it gone. And then it's a hop and a skip to say, well, actually, we're a multicultural, multi-faith nation, and that's the end of Christianity at the heart of things. So the first policy we're going to introduce is that parliamentarians, public officers, anyone taking public office of any description has a choice. They can either swear on the Bible or they can swear on a neutral oath, but there will be no swearing on a foreign religious text. We will promote our Christian heritage, our culture. If you go back to the slide where I laid out what culture means, Christianity infuses every part of that, our art, our buildings, our statues, what we fought for. If you go into a church in this country, you all know this. You go into a church in a foreign country, and what you see are trappings of Christianity. You walk into a church in this country, and you see the trappings, obviously, of Christianity, but you see also, alongside them, the heritage of this country played out through remembering those who died in the various villages where these churches are, those who died in the great wars protecting this country, protecting our Christian heritage. Our church and our heritage and our great military past, which is very, very important to this country, they all go hand in hand, and we will reinforce that Christian heritage. And we will prohibit the conversion of churches to foreign religions. When you see a church being converted to another religion, that religion is basically saying, we've beaten you. We've taken your building. That is going to stop. How is it that our flags have become so toxic to the British people? There's nothing toxic about our flags. Yes, they're Christian too, by the way. They're Christian too. Maybe that's why people find them offensive. But our national flag, it'll be mandatory under an advanced government, that our national flag will fly on every building that is of public ownership. And we will recognize our great heroes and national figures. We're not going to allow statues to come down. If you let your statues come down, you forget who you are. And I did a debate recently at the Oxford Union in which I talked about Cecil Rhodes in glowing terms. You can imagine the kind of response that got. But the Rhodes Scholarship was bequeathed by Rhodes, saying that it should be blind to ethnicity and religious beliefs. Did you know that, folks? He was not a racist. He was a good man. And we are allowing our national heroes to be denounced. That has to stop too. And I want to also nod here, if I may, very briefly. I've only got 30 seconds left, but I'm going to go over time because there's a lot more to get through. I'm going to nod very briefly to the people Paul Thorpe remembered in his little speech. For every national hero we have, Wellington, Winston Churchill, Nelson, the Duke of Marlborough, behind them stood hundreds and thousands and millions of working class people. It is the British working class on whose back this country was built, and we forget them at our peril. When Nelson said, "England expects every man shall do his duty," people, the working class who manned those ships, weren't petrified, as I perhaps might have been. They cheered. They went into the French and Spanish fleet, bold in heart, and they laid down their lives to save our country. That is what culture is. The British working class are our culture. We will fund councils to promote quaint old things like Christmas and Easter. And we will speak English in every public sector. And of course, we have to do away with this decolonization of the UK. Again, that's an attack on our heritage. It's an attack on our culture. It's an attack on who we are. We will recolonize the curriculum. We will teach our constitution to our children. We will teach them about the contract that the British state has with citizenry, where citizenry get privileges because they're citizens, but then they have to stand up for the country as well. We will teach our children how our Christian forefathers have actually been a force for good, not the kind of Christianity that the anti-racist lot outside would like us to think. And let me just remind everyone that our national anthem is actually a hymn. It's a hymn, and we will sing it proudly in every state sector school and all our universities. It will be celebrated. At the heart of all of this is the family. And we are going to protect the family. We are going to destigmatize actually having children. We're going to destigmatize women looking after their children. And we're going to do that practically as well. This idea that you should reward people who can't afford to have children through a dependency culture of handing out benefits is wrong. Benefits for having children should be removed. You should be encouraged to have children through the tax system. You should be encouraged to get married. You should get a tax break. For every child you have, you should get a tax break. And you should be encouraged to stay at home and look after your children by getting a tax break. Get the tentacles of the state out of my family. And now the last one. The last line here you might think is a bit odd. Why has he suddenly put in a tax policy under the family? Well, let me tell you, inheritance tax is an evil tax. It raises not much for the exchequer, but it's a fantastic tool for the far left because it forces families to sell their homes, break their connection with the country, sell their businesses, break their connection with the economy of the country, sell their farms, break the connection with making food domestically in this country. It is an attack on the connection between the British people, its heritage, our heritage, and the land. And that's what they want to do. Inheritance tax, if we want to save the country, inheritance tax has to go. We have to reintroduce, I've touched on this briefly before, we have to reintroduce aspiration. You have to know that when you work, you will be rewarded for it. How can you go forward with confidence during the day if you think that every time you earn a pound, the government's going to reach into your back pocket and nick it, and then use that money actually to keep those people who refuse to work in the state that they're kept, and not just them, but foreigners who've come to this country. And we've got to be grown up. We do need to make our accounts stack up. And other political parties won't talk about it. But we must cut back welfare. If you don't work, you will not get paid. There's no such thing as a free lunch. We're going to pursue British farming. I'm going to have to rush a bit, folks. We're going to pursue British farming. We're going to protect the countryside from new build housing. It's not necessary. We've got exhausted villages and town centres across the country, full of property that's vacant, that can be repurposed. You know why we can't repurpose it? Because of net zero. We can't repurpose it because of net zero, so they go and build on the green countryside. It's lunatic. And they take our country, once the countryside's gone, it's gone. We will reverse that. And we will prohibit the removal of farms from the fabric of British culture. Andy talked about the risk of prosecution when you serve this country, but there's also something else that we've done for our veterans, which is absolutely horrendous, or haven't done for our veterans, is we've turned our backs on them after they have served the country. We don't give them housing, we don't give them priority housing. We don't look after the mental health issues that they often have when they've come back from war zones. We give them no mechanism by which they can come back from the extreme conditions in which they have fought to protect this country, to find their feet again in society in this country. We have to repurpose them, if you like. They need a helping hand when they come out. And we will obviously get rid of any, I mean, I love the way Andy said it, you know, if we're going to put an officer or a member of the military on charge, well, then it has to go all the way up to blooming cabinet ministers. That's a good one. I think that would be the end of the prosecution of anyone in the military. We're going to get rid of dual nationality. Either you're British or you're not. We will define multiculturalism as an extreme far-left form of ideology, which we will denounce. Even integration's not good enough. People have to be assimilated into British culture. There can be no foreign religious courts in the United Kingdom. There can be no public calls to prayer. And as much as I would wish not to have to use the law to bring our culture back into balance, things are so out of balance that I'm afraid we have no option now but to ban the burqa and the niqab. The burqa and the niqab are the outward expression of the repression of women. How did we get there? It also is an overt rejection of British culture. When you see a woman wearing the burqa and niqab, she is looking down on British culture. She is rejecting us. How can you be in our country, claim to be British, and reject Britain? And finally, I mean, we shouldn't have to say this, but finally, we will ban first cousin marriage.